Hello, and welcome to another in our series, Leading Voices in Federal Contract Management. I'm Vanessa Roberts of Federal News Network, and today my guest is Kim Denver of Leidos. Kim is Senior Vice President, Chief Corporate Contracts Executive at Leidos. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. So before we get into the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about Leidos and the work that you all do with your customers?
Yes. Leidos is a Fortune 500 company. We are an information technology, science, engineering, solutions and services company, solving some of the world's toughest challenges. We have about 43,000 employees. Those employees work every day on our customers' missions, solving those tough problems through technology, science, and engineering.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself and your professional journey and how you got to Leidos.
Yeah, it's been a storied one, So I probably about 40 years of experience, professional experience. I got into the contracting and acquisition career field with the Army as a civilian, and that was about 33 of those 40 years, right, of professional experience. Started off in base camp installation contracting, really the ground floor of learning how to execute contracts and develop contracts and understand the business. It wasn't the most sophisticated contracts, but very, very important contracts for those local installations. From there, I transitioned to what I would say were major defense acquisition contracts in the modeling and simulation environment, which you would think of as virtual reality type. That was really a cool environment to be in. And I did that about 16 years. And over that time, I then had an opportunity to move into the Corps of Engineers, where I then ran procurement for the entire Corps of Engineers. And did that for a few years, and quite fascinating organization to be in. And then because of the Corps of Engineers, my experience in base type installation level contracting, I really touched everything through the entire acquisition lifecycle. Everything from support on the installations through the basic and applied research, engineering, manufacturing, development, through production, and then actually sustainment, and then ultimately retirement of systems and such like that. I did that about 24 years, a little over 24 years with the government. And then I left the Corps of Engineers. The Secretary of the Army at that time, Pete Guerin, pulled me over from the Corps of Engineers to run contracting and procurement for the entire Army. Context-wise, I had about a little over 8,000 employees. Wow. I was responsible for contracting in Afghanistan and Iraq during that time period. And I had about 270 contracting offices across the world.
Wow. So
a lot of experience there. And then there was a point in time where I was approached by a company then known as SCIC. Now that company is split into two companies, one called SCIC and then Leidos, which was the legacy company. And now I work for Leidos running contracts for the company.
Well, it's great that you're here today talking to us,
yes,
because you have a perfect perspective having that much experience in government. Also just that end-to-end experience, knowing every part of the contracting journey. It's not just, oh, we signed a deal today.
Right.
There's a whole start, concepting, all the way through, as you said, closeout, which
Yeah.
is a huge piece of it too. Well, let's talk a little bit about operational maturity of contracting, and when you're in the Leidos side of it, the contracting company or the contractor, the processes, the technologies, the strategies, where does that stand at Leidos? How do you feel Leidos is in its operational maturity as a contracting organization?
As a contracting organization, when you mention to me operational maturity, the first thing that comes to my mind are the people. And I'll hit on a little of that. It clearly also gets into your process, your procedures, your systems, right? But ultimately, it's about your workforce, their training, the level at which they operate, I would say the contracting workforce at Leidos is less transactional, more value add transformational. And that's the part that you really look at and go, before I can really excel at operational maturity, my workforce has to be at a sufficient level of training and experience, because no two contracts are the same. And the government that we do business with, they're actually doing a lot of innovative contracting these days that cause you to reach back to your experience base. And I like to say to the workforce, we create value in every deal, and we protect value in every contract.
You made me think of something when you answered that, is that a huge piece of this is that the government often leans a lot on the contractor, right, to help them carry out these contracts. And by that I mean the actual management of it.
Yeah.
And so that's where that value added and the people come into play, right?
Right. I think what you find, and you're finding a lot more these days, when I was working on the government side, as I mentioned, there was a huge push to teach the contracts workforce on the government side to know that it was beneficial to connect with industry for ideas. Because most careers on the government side, you might be at 5 contracting places learning. In industry, you're contracting at hundreds of activities. And it puts you in a perfect position to cross-pollinate ideas, from one organization to the next. So the challenge is at times is, are contracting officers open to having the discussion? And you maybe hear, but my workforce hears me use a lot the words I call there's an abundance of finesse. And that is how you work with contracting officers who are clearly the ones that make business decisions for the government. But you have to have a way to reach them. Not that you know it better, but that as a colleague, you've seen second and third order effects, unintended consequences. And so you lay it at their feet to help them understand, here's some things we've seen, but it's for you to go back, synthesize, and get a better result. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is, in the environments of contracting with the government, there's this concept of best value contracting. What we really want is the government to make the best value in the context of all the information, as opposed to there's a lack of information and you make the best value decision of the guesses that came in.
Right, it doesn't take everything into account.
Yes, right, exactly.
Well, what are the biggest value drivers for advancing a contract team's maturity? You talked about people, and is there advice you would offer to other businesses about both what you learned in the government, but also what you've learned since you've been at Leidos?
Yeah. Some of that, I think, as it relates to me, has been fundamental throughout my career. And I think the important thing to understand is a contracts organization is not an organization unto itself. It exists to support clients internal to the company and collaborate with external customers. And that's sort of how I distinguish. We got customers, but my internal I refer to clients, and the external to customers. And so you have to think about what's your value proposition. What type of contracts organization are you? Are you a transactional one? Purchase reps will come in, you go make decisions, you really don't need any input. We're not that organization, right? There's clearly paperwork associated with it to follow up. The real challenge, it comes back to the people, is first you have to understand in your value proposition what you are doing for the organization. So for us at Leidos, the contracts organization is one where we see our value really in 3 main type value drivers, and that is support growth, increase return, and manage risk. And that's all done through relationships with those that we do business with. When you understand that that's your value proposition, you then understand how to train your workforce to connect with their counterparts, create those relationships, and get in an environment where we can work together, we can collaborate together, we can agree to disagree, but ultimately we arrive at solutions that are in the collective interest.
And it is different working in contracting with the federal government. those risk factors are kind of different. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit. And that's a key place where, in the federal environment, the contractor brings a lot of value, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I used to be in the federal government, what I used to impress upon my contracting workforce is we don't build anything. Our contractors do. They're our partners. Okay, maybe it's not an equal partnership because the government is the customer, but if you still approach it with a mindset that we're working together to solve problems, then I think on the government side, what you'll really find is the most astute contracting officers understand that they are a liaison. They're solving problems too, but they're a liaison between government and industry. And their roles are to make sure that they protect the government's interest, not at the expense of a contractor, right? But that they make sure industry is treated equitably, fairly, and we will arrive at a solution that supports the government's mission, but we've reached a fair deal on both sides.
Can you talk a little bit about the flip side of that for you guys, and sort of being able to really keep pace with what are the requirements that are on the contracting, your business people inside Leidos that you guys are supporting,
Sure.
Those clients.
Sure.
Or
clients on the inside.
Right, clients on the inside.
Yeah.
And supporting them and making sure that, everything's operating efficiently, and the role of the contracting operation in that. Because I think sometimes people don't realize what a powerful role the contracting operation in a vendor plays.
Yeah. I think a big point that I would make, that I consistently make, is, the contract is a relationship, but it's a pretty rigid relationship if you think about it, and rightfully so. We have to understand the terms and the conditions and the things that we're working towards. But it is the key driver is the relationships that you have. Inside of a company like Leidos, I would have a colleague, or my teams would have colleagues that are program managers. They need to have that same relationship with their colleagues on the government side. Likewise, contracting individuals, we need to make sure we have those relationships, and in tandem and in collaboration and with an orchestrated way, we make sure that we keep our counterparts on the government side aware of how program performance is taking, what the challenges are, because if you understand the role of the contracting officer, interestingly enough, in the government, the contracting officer owns the business relationship. And so they're constantly in a position of contemplating what is the right business arrangement. And then I think with the workforce that we teach and educate is, there's a realm of possibilities, but you've got to be able to have that conversation so that you can ferret out what is the best path, collectively speaking. And so the contracts organization serves a critical role that way. When you understand your counterpart on the government side are making critical decisions and have to decide, often through multiple recommendations that they're getting from their colleagues on the government side. So they've got a fiduciary responsibility to protect both sides. It's an interesting role, so that's why I call it this liaison. But it's a difficult position. This is the part I think, and not just staying on the industry side, having been on the government side, it's an interesting challenge that contracting officers have. They have to be experts in so many areas, and it's a challenge. And there's a high expectation, a premium on experiential knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so if we work collectively together, that's where I talk about this cross-pollination. My team may have seen things that one organization hasn't gone through. Rather than come and say, this is the way to do it, we come and say, here's the ways we've seen it. So we help put that on the table. And when I was on the government side, I would say to my contracting officers, connect with industry because they've done it so many different ways. Treat that as a mini classroom, so that we can arrive at a collective approach forward.
We're going to take a quick break in our conversation with Leidos' Kim Denver. We'll be right back.